Sounds Like This podcast. I'm your host, Julie Murray, and today I am joined by Jyee Byrne, who runs Wolfpack Life Coaching. Jyee is a psychosocial recovery coach specializing in helping families navigate this very difficult world. Jyee is a sci-fi nerd / romantic at heart who loves giant malamutes and various other fuzzy creatures. Jyee, thank you so much for coming along and discussing things with me today.
Thank you for having me, Julie. I appreciate the opportunity to come down and talk.
It's so lovely to have you here. So today I thought we could have a bit of a chat about how to build positive family culture, how to impact the values that we're setting and leading with our children, maybe some strategies that we can put in place if we're seeing some complex behaviours, and kind of where a lot of those behaviours might be coming from. I thought we could kind of dig into that a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. This is my bread and butter. This is what I love to do. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. So can you tell me a bit about how you got into life coaching?
Oh, interesting journey. So I grew up in a household, well, my whole family on both sides are neurodiverse. There's autism, Asperger's, all kinds of stuff going on. So both grandfathers got sent out to Australia as punishment for their behaviour when they were younger, which then kind of rippled through the family, with them not understanding why they got sent to Australia, I don't think.
Just off to the colony you go.
Yeah. So they just passed on some bad traits that they learnt when they were younger. So with the tools that they had, they did the best they could. However, it just added to the stress of growing up in a house of parents who didn't have the tools for me being autistic, for me having abandonment issues, with not many people back in the 90s understanding what abandonment it was or is. Yep. So my mum would always palm me off to everyone else's house, and it kind of taught me that like I wasn't good enough and I wasn't worthy, and it just kind of grew from there. And eventually I ended up in foster care through bumping heads with mum, and then mum sent me to dad's house in Melbourne from Brisbane, and that was another house full of turmoil, conflict, but they were all doing the best they could with the tools they had. They just didn't have the tools specifically to deal and manage someone like myself. So
what you've kind of alluded to there is, not having strategies through generations and how that impacts future generations, and, through no fault, I guess, of anyone in particular, but just not having the tools to be able to support people with whatever those needs are has had a massive impact on your family and your life, and I'm assuming your parents' lives, and everyone that kind of has stemmed from whatever the initial trauma was. But okay, so that's huge, and I'm sorry, but I'm kind of glad. I'm really glad that you've done a huge amount of work to get to where you are now, and I'm really excited to discuss, how you've gone from a child that wasn't supported and wasn't understood to where you are now. So what kind of got you into the life coaching itself? Was there, just little incremental somethings that made you think, oh, this is what I need to do with my life? Or was there like a bolt of lightning moment?
Well, I would say that personal development came a special interest of mine. So just obsession by reading and curiosity would kill me. As like I'd read one development book with the realization probably 6 years ago, I had a failed business and I ended up in a psych ward. I wasn't doing okay. And that's what pushed me over the edge to really make the big change.
Yeah.
So I spent my birthday in the psych ward for being suicidal, and it really shook me on the fact that I thought that was normal. Like the environment, I wasn't uncomfortable, which was like, hang on, there's something wrong here.
The actual psych ward itself was a comfortable space for you to be in.
5 out of 10. Like it wasn't anything distressing. Like it was,
Oh.
yeah. But it's an extreme environment, but I was that comfortable there that I was like, no, it's time for change.
You'd been desensitized to all sorts of behaviors around you that nothing was alarm bells.
Nothing at all. So then I did cognitive behavioral therapy, which was a big game changer, retraining the brain on how to talk to yourself and question things that may not be what we think. Our perception isn't actually reality. What it is. Like the reality is a lot different. So when we start learning those questions, so I then just got more and more obsessed by personal development. So I just kept reading. The problem I have is because of my interpretation of the world is very black and white and if someone tells me that, oh, I want you to do this, I see it as a specific thing, or I want you to be a high performer worker. So I push myself to be that high performer, but they don't like having the high performer around them as well. So I was kind of conflicting with myself a lot.
That's really interesting. So how has your understanding and I guess of you as a person changed over time? Like when did you identify as an autistic person? When did you get your autism diagnosis? And also, like, has your perception of yourself changed since then? Like, do you think about yourself differently, or do you just think about yourself in the same kinds of ways, but now you have more tools? Or how did that come about?
It was really after the psych ward that I really had to hone down, and that's when I went and did the testing and everything. So I was probably 26 maybe.
Right.
It was quite late. I thought I just was temperamental or moody. Like there was always an assumption over the years of what it was, but due to not wanting to face those what if kind of stereotypes that are out there.
Yeah.
But however, today, when I'm sitting here today, I think it's a superpower. It's phenomenal what I'm able to achieve when I focus on stuff that I want to achieve.
Yeah.
And I have learned all the strategies for myself to learn how to get out of my own way. And also be self-aware enough when I'm drained. If I've like ran my battery dead, and I'm like just about to border on a meltdown, and I'm like, hang on, you got to recharge. So I've got all these different, like just a simple having the right socks and jocks on can make for me is amazing to be making sure that I'm okay, making sure my sleep's okay, making sure I've eaten.
Yeah.
Like my wife's banned me from leaving the house unless I've had breakfast.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, no, if you haven't eaten breakfast, you're not leaving the house.
Yeah.
So like you get hangry.
Yeah. Well, we know just before we started this, I was shoveling food into my face because I was on the cusp of hangry. And I think it's really important that, once you start to recognize this is what your body is telling you, to actually respond to that and to put the things in place so that things don't escalate and you can regulate yourself. So, I think simple things like socks and jocks can be very helpful for all humans. Like, it's just such a basic kind of fundamental. You don't want to start with, maybe pun intended, more friction than you want in life. Like, you got to be comfortable in your skin and in your body and everything else. And
so to explain it probably would be we have our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. And with the whole autism thing, there's no I found in my own experience, there's no gatekeeper between the two. So you think it, you do it, you think it, you do it. Yeah. There's no alarm system there to say, oh, that's inappropriate, or you're actually annoyed because you've got the wrong jocks or socks on, or the shoes are too tight, or whatever the issue, like pants. Like my pants have to be flexible. I can't wear like rigid style clothes. Shirts, same thing. Like I'm very particular. However, when you talk to me, people meet me, they don't see those things today.
Because you've changed your own environment, even if it's just your clothing, to make yourself more comfortable in the everyday. So you're already setting yourself up to succeed because they're not meeting you in rigid fabric, like they're meeting you in something nice and soft and stretchy.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like it took me to learn to have control was to have flexibility. So what I mean by that is like having flexibility in myself and my emotions and my self-awareness gives me that ultimate control. So the more rigid I am, I always seem to lose. So if I look back at all those past scenarios where I was super rigid, I had this idea, no, it has to be done this way. And I would lose my mind in a situation.
That fixed mindset.
I actually lost. No matter what happened, it was like I always lost. If even my point of view was out of whack. So having even like self-talk was so important to catch up on, being aware of being softer with myself. And that's okay to be softer with yourself, which is
It's a huge strength to be softer with yourself and to be vulnerable. And yeah, it's very, very cool. So I know that I personally know that some of the families that you work with come to you because they're experiencing behaviors that have got to the point where they're at breaking point. Can you, obviously, without going into specifics of individuals, but can you talk to us about what some of those behaviors might be? So if, people are listening and they're thinking, oh, I'm not coping because of X, Y, Z, what are some of the behaviors that you help families work through?
Well, creating the map to understand the behavior. So when you look at all behavior is needs met. What's the need of the behavior? So if we look at certainty and uncertainty, a lot of people, especially that are autistic, love a high level of certainty.
Yes.
So they relate certainty to safety.
Yes.
If I'm certain, I'm safe, because when I'm uncertain, I feel unsafe.
Okay.
But however, you have to have a certain amount of uncertainty to be balanced. It's kind of a bit of a tricky balance to find. So it's important to recognize, is it a certainty thing or is it they're uncertain of change? So like routines and change.
Yeah.
You give a child change and they freak out because they're like, oh, but I had this pre-planned. I had this. A lot of them pre-practice stuff because that's
how they deal with the world.
That's how they deal with the world, because they're so unsure and uncertain. So understanding that certainty. Understanding, recognizing, oh, that's actually, they're not dealing with change. How do I create certainty in my child? Right? But also making sure that they're certain in me, making sure that I'm not going to rescue them, or if they're constantly pretending like they can't do something, or whatever the situation, the individual child or individual family, very different for each person. But then you go, if you can get that balance there with that individual and recognize that in the other person, the next level down is significance, which is tipped into love and connection. Now, a lot of people struggle with love and connection and what that looks like. So significance in boys is anger.
Yes.
So they overcompensate with the anger because they don't know how to love.
They're not connected.
Yeah, because they're really wanting that love and connection, but that takes vulnerability. Now, as a male, as someone who's in his 30s, I can tell you confidently, all men on this planet have scars to do around with vulnerability. We'll guard up and we'll protect ourselves, which means we struggle with connecting in love. So that means we have a tendency of dipping into our significant side and throwing ourselves out of balance and going anger.
Yeah.
And like when we grow up in a family home, we watched our parents, that's what they did to survive from their parents.
Yeah.
So that's what we learned.
Yes.
Does that make kind of
It absolutely makes sense.
Makes
but,
sense?
The angrier you get, the more rigid you get, the tougher you are, the less you let people in, the harder that connection becomes, the further you kind of push each other away. So it becomes that cycle. And love and connection is something I'm really passionate about. I use music making, whether I'm working with educators and children or families or just out and about in the community or however it is that I'm doing the music making. The music making is really the vehicle for all of the learning that's going on, but none of the learning happens without connection first. Like all learning has to come from a place of I feel safe, I feel secure, I feel seen, I feel heard. I can rest in that love. I can rest in knowing that, someone's got me and I'm good. And so I spend a lot of my work in modeling this is how we interact, and so we don't have to innately say, I've got you to a child, although you can. But, how do we use our bodies and our gesture and our voices and our breath and our everything else to actually just be vulnerable ourselves and accessible and let them know, we're perfectly imperfect too, and that's okay. And yes, you made a mistake, and yes, I make mistakes, and we all do it together, but it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, I think, when I get families coming in and they think they're coming in for a music class, and then that's what I'm doing with them, like, whoa.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, because music is the way that I do it because it's got so many great cognitive benefits, but really it's about the relationship between them. And I always find it really beautiful when you get, like a big macho dad coming in and often with a very small person and literally not knowing what do I do now that I have this child. You know, I am their parent and now what?
Yeah.
And I think it wasn't modeled to them necessarily as well. So,
but I think what tends to happen is that we come to the realization that being a parent is something that we learn by practice, and those habits that we create have a ripple effect. And that's what scares a lot of parents in creating better choices, because they're like, oh, what if I do this? What if I do that? What if I do that? What if I, you know what? We're all human. We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
If we own our mistakes, then we can learn from it. Yeah.
And we can also model that in being human, we make little mistakes, we make big mistakes, but owning our behaviors is huge in terms of the way somebody else will perceive those behaviors or perceive that information. You know, like if intent, I think is really important. If you say, okay, I completely messed that up and I'm genuinely really sorry for the outcome and I know that hurt you or I know whatever, but I'm taking responsibility for it. I think it's a lot easier for the person on the receiving end of that to be able to deal with those feelings as well. And I think anger and other things probably dissipate faster than it building. Yeah.
I think it comes down to trust. So trust is probably the most powerful tool that I see with my coaching in my life, is building trust so people can feel comfortable enough to communicate those things that they usually hide from the world, or they feel shame or whatever there's going on. Because if they trust, that means they know that I'm not going to judge them, because my coaching space is a judgment-free zone. And that's based on the fact that my job is to serve as a coach. My job is not to rescue you. My job is to challenge you to become the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
So I always say to people, I'm like, you're going to love and hate me at the same time. I hope you understand that.
Yeah.
And that's what the goal is, to make myself redundant in that coaching space. Is I want to be able to help you find that road, so then you can go on your journey no matter where that leads. And if you've got to touch base, give me a call.
Yeah.
And it's always, oh, okay, cool. You had a little bit of a slip. Cool. What did you learn? Like when something bad happens, there's opportunity to step up. Obviously I was doing something
didn't work.
Something
Let's
didn't
look
work.
At what didn't
it's feedback.
Work.
It's honest feedback. And I think we shy away from those harder conversations as well. Like having those conversations as feedback. And like, if I have intention and I communicate it one way and the feedback I get isn't failure, it's just that feedback, and you go, okay, what do I have to do to communicate in a better way? What does a person, like if you look at the love languages between people, am I speaking Chinese to someone that only
speaks French?
Yeah. Like, and this is what we don't understand. Communication is so complex but simple that it's communicating in the person that they need. If they're a little person, whether it's your partner or whether whoever it is as well.
And actually taking the time to work with whoever that person across from you is, to understand what their love language is, to understand what that looks like to them. Because like I know my hubby and our love languages are very, very different. I know that if he is angry, upset, whatever, he just needs a cuddle. He knows, or hopefully he does, if I'm angry or upset, if you touch me, I will end you. Like, and so it's really interesting. He's like, no, I need to be held. And I'm like, no, don't you dare. Like, but every person needs different things. And building respectful relationships, I think, is about identifying what those things are and going, okay, I can see that this is what you need right now. And, you know, being in a position to give that to someone is such an incredible gift. Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you. So what are some of the or even let's just talk about like one quick strategy, because we're almost out of time, but just one quick strategy. If we say, okay, my family yells all the time, you know, there's obviously lots of reasons behind that, and we know that it could come from other places and they clearly don't have the tools they need to communicate effectively. But kind of where would you start with a family that just says to you, oh, I yell all the time?
Oh, it depends on the dynamics of it. So there's two different ways that I do it. There's a game that I play with. So if it's the dad that's frustrated, I give him the the one thing game, which is when you come home from work, you touch
I love one thing. Yes, please share this.
Well,
I've heard this.
Yeah,
I've heard
so
you share
what's the
this.
one thing I can do that'll impact my life the most? So what that is about is just really focusing on the important stuff and getting the important stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is I go, okay, well, let's turn it into a game. When you touch the door handle, you go, breathe in, breathe out, open the door, go in and ask your partner, what's the one thing I can do to help you right now? So what happens is they hear you come home, they hear you. So that's a first response because we always hear people first.
And it becomes, I guess, subconscious as well. Like, you know, they'll
it just
hear
turns
it.
that pressure down.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what type of day they ever had.
Yeah.
The kids, if you're dealing with kids all day, they're uncertainty machines. You can't control them. You just, it's just,
machines.
yeah, you're
I
just
love
like trying to
that.
manage it. Like, especially if there's I've got clients that have got 4 kids and they're challenging with their own autism as well. So they're trying to balance everything. So having that certainty that that person's going to come in and ask what's important to me changes the dynamics of the house. So the feedback I've got from clients, they're like, oh my God, you've changed the dynamics of the house. We get to the weekend, she's not angry at me anymore. She's not frustrated. She knows that I'm going to help.
Yeah. And I guess that means that as that partner's coming home, they know that they're not walking into a house that's treading on eggshells either, because, you know, it sucks if you've been at home and you've been overwhelmed and everything else, and then all you want is someone to like tag team with you so you can, I don't know, like when my kids were younger, it was like, go to the toilet by yourself, have a shower. It's just like, I just need to X, Y, Z, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
Because you've always got too many balls in the air. And I remember it used to be like I used to get really stressed out if for whatever reason, you know, he's running late or I didn't know or whatever, like that uncertainty.
Yeah.
You know, and then in my mind it would be like, you know.
And you rev yourself up and then you walk in.
And then conflict instead of support. And I did it. Like I was the one that threw the fuel on that fire and all he did was exist.
Yeah. But it's funny how when we look at it, we're like, wow, it's so simple but complex at the same time.
And I think when you're in it and your life is busy and demanding and chill, you know, as the uncertainty creatures that they are, the level of intensity of parenting is quite extreme. Like
it's the hardest thing you're ever going to do in your
really
lifetime.
Full
like
on.
Being a mum is the most traumatic thing that women go through.
The making them or the actual parenting them? Because they're two separate traumas.
But they're completely different things,
I say that with love, but like it's a lot.
But it's the truth though. Like I don't know how many mums I've spoken to. They're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm failing my children. The pressure that they put on themselves from society is just astronomical. So I always love to try and blend those two things where, okay, well, from a male's point of view, I know the expectation that the society puts on us. I know that the expectation of being a provider, what that feels like and what that is. And I've been talking to mums about the expectation of being a mum and that weight on the shoulders.
Yeah.
And they go out into this world and you're given this little child and you're like, you're in charge of this child. And if you don't act right or do right, but there's no actual training for it, proper training, because each child's different.
Yeah.
We're going to brand you as a bad mother.
Yeah. Or you're going to brand yourself as a bad mother, because it kind of like what you were talking about before with your own self-talk, you know, mums do that to themselves. They berate themselves. I didn't do this. I didn't do the administration for this. There's so many moving parts, no matter what age your child is, that it's a full-time job just keeping up with kid admin, man. It's a lot. And I think, you know, you've got social and emotional well-being and actually physically looking after them and all of those things. And the entire time you are parenting, first and foremost, you need to keep yourself regulated, because if you don't calm the farm, how are you going to calm theirs?
The important part is to learning to love ourselves, because we can't love anyone else more than we love ourselves. So when someone says, but I love my child more than myself, that's just the crap going on in the head. And the truth is, by learning to be present with ourselves and able to show up a bit better for ourselves, it gives us the room to go, oh, actually, what does my child need from me? How do I be present? How do I be flexible? That means that child and even partner or anyone, that ripple effect through your life is such a great dynamic when it changes.
Yeah.
And just from watching people even 12 months into coaching with me, it's just phenomenal, the changes that they get. And they call me about, oh my God, I had this happened, and they're so grateful. I'm like, you did all the work. I just gave you some tools and passed it on. And
isn't that beautiful when the work works?
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining me. It was absolutely gorgeous to have you on, Jyee. Maybe I'll get you to come back and we'll chat further. I feel like I could talk to you all day. Thank you so much. If you'd like to know more about Jyee's incredible work, please visit his website at thewolfpacklifecoach.com. And if you'd like to know about music and the brain, please visit mine, soundslikethis.com.au. Thank you. Bye.